The halls of General Hospital had seen betrayal before. They had seen mob wars, family secrets, impossible resurrections, and tragedies that shattered Port Charles to its core. But nothing prepared the hospital staff for the destruction Curtis Ashford unleashed when his rage collided with Dr. Isaiah Gannon's future. And by the time the dust settled, one devastating question echoed through every corridor. Would the hospital have no choice but to bring back Patrick Drake? It started with blood on the floor, not metaphorical blood, real blood. The emergency room had already been spiraling into chaos after a massive pileup on Route 31 sent more than a dozen patients flooding into General Hospital. Nurses rushed stretchers through the halls while doctors barked orders over each other. The surgical board was overloaded. The trauma wing was running out of supplies. Isaiah Gannon stood at the center of it all, focused, sharp, determined. He had spent months proving himself as one of the most promising surgeons GH had hired in years. Patients trusted him, colleagues respected him. Even those who doubted him at first had slowly started admitting Isaiah was the real deal, which was exactly why what happened next became so catastrophic. Curtis Ashford stormed into the hospital carrying years of resentment and suspicion, like gasoline waiting for a match. His marriage had been hanging by a thread. Portia was keeping secrets again. Jordan had warned him to stay calm, but Curtis had reached the point where logic no longer mattered. All he could see was Isaiah standing too close to his family, too involved in Portia's life, too comfortable around the people Curtis loved. And then came the rumor. One whispered accusation from an overheard conversation. Someone implied Isaiah may have altered confidential records connected to a patient tied to Curtis's investigation. It wasn't proven. It wasn't verified. But Curtis didn't care, because rage rarely waits for evidence. The confrontation exploded outside Operating Room 3. Nurses tried stepping between them. Portia screamed for Curtis to stop. Even Elizabeth Baldwin froze when Curtis grabbed Isaiah by the collar and slammed him against the wall hard enough to crack a mounted clipboard. "You think you can destroy my family and walk away?" Curtis roared. Isaiah shoved him back instantly. "You've lost your damn mind." The tension snapped. Curtis swung first. A brutal punch landed across Isaiah's jaw, sending him crashing into a medication cart. Glass shattered across the floor. A nurse screamed. Security alarms started blaring through the corridor. But the worst part wasn't the fight. It was what happened during it. Isaiah stumbled backward directly into a trauma patient being wheeled toward surgery. The stretcher tipped. Equipment crashed to the floor. A critical oxygen line disconnected for several terrifying seconds before the team stabilized the patient again. And suddenly this wasn't just a fight. It was negligence. Dangerous negligence. By the end of the night, cell phone footage of the incident had spread across Port Charles. Hospital donors were furious. The board demanded answers. And Isaiah's entire career started collapsing before his eyes. At first, everyone assumed Curtis would be blamed. After all, he threw the first punch. But GH's legal department saw things differently. The footage showed Isaiah physically engaging after the initial strike. Risk management teams argued that as a physician on active duty, Isaiah should have de-escalated instead of retaliating. Worse, some board members claimed his emotional involvement compromised patient safety long before the fight even started. It became a nightmare. One hearing turned into 3. Then came the suspension. Dr. Isaiah Gannon was officially removed from surgical duty pending investigation. The announcement hit General Hospital like an earthquake. Portia was horrified. Trina couldn't believe Curtis had caused this. Even Stella tore into Curtis for letting his anger spiral so completely out of control. "You didn't just hurt that man," Stella snapped. "You may have destroyed his whole future." Curtis tried defending himself, but deep down, he knew she was right. Isaiah's reputation had been everything, and now his name was attached to violence, misconduct, and a possible malpractice review. The media circus only made things worse. Headlines exploded online. General Hospital surgeon under review after hospital brawl. Isaiah Gannon faces license suspension. Chaos inside Port Charles's most famous hospital. Patients started canceling procedures. Insurance partners threatened audits. Board members panicked about the hospital's image. And suddenly, General Hospital faced a terrifying reality. They no longer had enough elite surgeons to maintain critical operations. That's when whispers about Patrick Drake began. At first, it sounded impossible. Patrick Drake had been gone for years. After losing Robin Scorpio Drake for a period he thought was permanent, Patrick rebuilt himself through grief and fatherhood. Even after Robin returned, the emotional scars never fully disappeared. He eventually stepped away from the constant chaos of Port Charles and focused on building a quieter life with his family. But General Hospital was desperate, and desperate hospitals make desperate calls. Monica Quartermain reportedly brought up Patrick's name first during a closed-door board meeting. "We need someone trusted," Monica argued, "someone patients believe in." The silence in the room said everything, because everyone knew she was right. Patrick Drake wasn't just another surgeon. He was a legend inside those walls. A world-class neurosurgeon, a respected leader, someone capable of stabilizing a hospital spinning out of control. But there was one problem. Patrick had no intention of coming back. Meanwhile, Isaiah's situation kept worsening. The medical review board demanded testimony from multiple staff members. Some defended Isaiah passionately. Others quietly admitted his judgment may have been compromised by growing tensions with Curtis and Portia. Then came the devastating twist nobody expected. A former patient filed a complaint connected to an earlier surgery Isaiah performed weeks before the fight. Suddenly, investigators started digging through old cases. Every operation, every chart, every outcome. It became a feeding frenzy. Isaiah went from respected surgeon to potential liability almost overnight. And Curtis finally realized the magnitude of what he had done. He tried apologizing. Isaiah nearly laughed in his face. "You think saying sorry fixes this?" Isaiah said coldly. "You put your hands on me in front of the entire hospital. You turned me into a scandal." Curtis looked genuinely shattered. "I never wanted this." "No," Isaiah replied. "You just lost control." The words haunted Curtis afterward, because they were true. Portia's fury toward Curtis reached a boiling point. She blamed him for everything, for the violence, for the public humiliation, for pushing Isaiah into emotional territory he never should have been forced into. And eventually Portia admitted something that stunned Curtis completely. Isaiah had been helping her cover a confidential medical issue connected to a young patient. Not an affair, not a betrayal, a medical secret. Curtis had destroyed a man's career over assumptions. That revelation ripped their marriage apart. Curtis sat alone in the Metro Court bar afterward, replaying every second of the confrontation in his head. The sound of Isaiah hitting the wall, the screaming nurses, the panic. One moment of rage had detonated half his life. But things inside General Hospital were about to get even worse. Because Isaiah wasn't the only doctor unraveling. Without him, surgical schedules collapsed into chaos. Lucas struggled handling the overload. Terry Randolph scrambled to keep departments functioning. Emergency surgeries got transferred to nearby hospitals. And then disaster struck during a critical procedure. A young patient coded on the operating table after an exhausted surgeon made a fatal delay. The patient survived. Barely. But the incident terrified the board. General Hospital no longer had enough experienced hands, which forced Monica to make the call she had been dreading. She contacted Patrick Drake. Across the country, Patrick stared at the voicemail for nearly an hour before listening again. Monica's voice sounded tired, desperate. "General Hospital needs help." 3 words changed everything. Back in Port Charles, rumors spread like wildfire the second Robin's name appeared in hospital discussions. Nurses whispered in elevators. Doctors speculated in break rooms. Could Patrick actually return? Would Robin come with him? Would Emma? Even longtime staff members seemed energized by the possibility. Because Patrick represented stability, a reminder of the hospital before constant disaster consumed it. But Patrick wasn't eager to reopen old wounds. Robin worried returning to Port Charles would drag their family back into chaos. She remembered too clearly how GH consumed people. Careers died there, relationships imploded there, trauma lived inside those walls. Patrick understood all of it, yet part of him couldn't ignore Monica's plea. General Hospital had once saved him too. It gave him purpose after losing his father. It gave him Robin. It gave him family. And now the hospital was collapsing under scandal and exhaustion. Meanwhile, Isaiah isolated himself completely. He stopped answering calls, stopped checking messages. Even Portia struggled reaching him. The humiliation was unbearable. One viral video had reduced years of hard work into a public spectacle. Then came the official notice. Pending final review, Isaiah's surgical privileges were indefinitely revoked. His hands shook reading the letter. For surgeons, operating wasn't just a job. It was identity, purpose, life itself. And Curtis had shattered it. Jordan eventually confronted Curtis privately. "You need to understand something," she told him quietly. "This doesn't end when the investigation does." Curtis stared down at the table. "I know." "No, you don't," Jordan replied. "You think guilt is punishment? It isn't. Watching someone lose everything because of you, that's the punishment." Her words hit harder than any accusation yet, especially because Curtis could already see it happening. Isaiah's confidence was gone. His reputation was destroyed. And Portia looked at Curtis differently now, like she no longer recognized the man she married. At General Hospital, staff morale reached catastrophic levels. Some blamed Curtis, others blamed Isaiah, but almost everyone agreed the hospital itself was breaking apart, which made Patrick Drake's potential return feel less like nostalgia and more like survival. Then came the twist fans never saw coming. Patrick finally called Monica back, not with an answer, with conditions. He would only consider returning temporarily if General Hospital agreed to sweeping changes in surgical oversight, physician support, and emergency staffing protections. Patrick refused to walk into another collapsing institution, pretending everything was fine. Monica agreed immediately, because she had no leverage left. And suddenly, the impossible became real. Patrick Drake was preparing to come home. News spread through Port Charles instantly. Even Sonny Corinthos heard about it before sunrise. "Patrick Drake?" Sonny repeated. "Now that's a name I haven't heard in years." At the hospital, reactions were explosive. Elizabeth smiled for the first time in days. Terry looked relieved enough to cry. Lucas called it the best news GH had gotten in months. But for Isaiah, Patrick's return represented something far more painful. Replacement. The hospital wasn't waiting for him anymore. They were moving on. That realization crushed whatever hope he still carried. Portia found him sitting alone near the waterfront one night, staring into darkness. "You can fight this," she whispered. Isaiah shook his head slowly. "They already decided who I am now." "That's not true, isn't it?" he asked bitterly. "One fight, one moment, and suddenly none of my work mattered." Portia had no response, because deep down she feared he was right. In Port Charles, reputations could die overnight, especially inside General Hospital. Days later, a black car finally pulled up outside the hospital entrance. Every nurse near the lobby stopped moving. Doctors turned toward the doors. Even patients noticed the shift in energy. Then Patrick Drake walked back into General Hospital. Older, sharper, more guarded, but unmistakably Patrick. The silence inside the lobby lasted only seconds before emotion exploded everywhere. Monica hugged him tightly. Elizabeth smiled through tears. Even longtime staff members looked visibly emotional seeing him walk those halls again. Patrick took everything in carefully. The tension, the exhaustion, the fear. GH was worse than he imagined, and he understood immediately why Monica sounded desperate. But Patrick's arrival created instant complications too, because not everyone welcomed him. Some younger doctors resented the hero surgeon narrative surrounding Patrick's return. Others worried the board would use him to erase deeper systemic failures instead of fixing them. And Isaiah? Isaiah saw Patrick as living proof his career was already over. Their first meeting happened unexpectedly. Patrick entered an empty observation room reviewing patient charts when Isaiah walked in from the opposite door. The silence between them felt heavy instantly. Patrick recognized him immediately. "Dr. Gannon?" Isaiah gave a faint nod. "So, the rumors were true." Patrick studied him carefully. "You're good," Patrick said quietly. "People here respect you." Isaiah almost laughed again. "Not enough." Patrick didn't argue, because he knew exactly how brutal medicine could become once public perception turned against you. "I'm not here to replace anybody," Patrick added. "That's exactly why you're here," Isaiah replied before walking away. Those words stayed with Patrick longer than expected, because beneath Isaiah's anger was something deeper: defeat. And Patrick knew that look intimately. He had worn it himself once. Meanwhile, Curtis's life kept imploding. Portia moved out temporarily. Trina barely spoke to him. Even Drew warned Curtis the hospital scandal might permanently stain his reputation in the community. For a man who spent years rebuilding himself, it felt like watching everything collapse brick by brick. And yet nothing hurt more than seeing Isaiah wandering General Hospital like a ghost. One afternoon, Curtis finally approached him again, not to defend himself, not to justify anything, just to tell the truth. "I was jealous," Curtis admitted quietly. "Not because of an affair, because you were becoming someone people depended on, and I hated how insecure that made me feel." Isaiah stared at him coldly. "You destroyed my life over your insecurity." Curtis nodded painfully. "Yes." No excuses, no yelling, just brutal honesty. For the first time, Isaiah actually saw genuine remorse in Curtis's eyes. But remorse didn't repair damage. The medical board still had not restored his privileges. Patients still questioned his name. And Patrick Drake was still standing inside his operating rooms. Then came another bombshell. Patrick reviewed Isaiah's suspended cases personally. After days examining charts, surgical footage, and reports, Patrick reached a shocking conclusion. Isaiah's work was exceptional. In some cases, groundbreaking. The accusations against him suddenly looked far weaker under proper scrutiny. Patrick immediately confronted the board. "You're burying one of the best surgeons this hospital has," he warned them. Board members pushed back aggressively. The scandal had already damaged GH publicly. Reinstating Isaiah too quickly could trigger backlash. Patrick refused to back down. "This hospital created the environment that exploded around him," Patrick argued. "Burning him alive won't fix it." Suddenly, the story changed again. Now Patrick Drake himself was defending Isaiah Gannon, and that alliance stunned everyone, especially Isaiah. When Patrick approached him afterward, Isaiah looked genuinely confused. "Why help me?" Patrick answered honestly. "Because I know what it feels like when this place decides you're expendable." That line hit Isaiah harder than expected. For the first time in weeks, someone saw him as more than a scandal headline. Someone believed he still mattered. And perhaps that would become Patrick Drake's real purpose in returning to Port Charles. Not replacing Isaiah, saving him. But General Hospital never lets redemption come easily. Because just as Isaiah's case started turning in his favor, another crisis erupted inside the hospital. One that threatened patients, staff, and the entire future of GH itself. And suddenly Patrick and Isaiah found themselves forced into an impossible partnership. A partnership that could either restore Isaiah's future or destroy both men completely.